Hello there, Michelle Shorts here for My Favourite Things. Today I have a simple night sky scene card to share with you using the Fairy Special set. So let's get started. I have stamped out one of the adorable little fairies from the Fairy Special set onto some smooth white cardstock with extreme black ink. I'm then going to colour her with Copic markers. So I'm starting off with the skin tone. So I go through the different shades of the skin and then I do go back with the darkest shades just to make sure that I do get some contrast between the different shades. I then, moving on to her dress, I wanted some kind of fairly bright pink colours. I'm using pink in the background, and so I wanted there to be pink in her dress. So I'm starting off again with my darkest shade, then bringing in the mid-tone, kind of flicking that towards the outside petals. It kind of looks like petals, I think, of her dress, kind of like a tutu. So I'm just kind of moving that colour out, and then I go in with my lightest shade, adding that towards the bottom of her dress pieces here. And then I did think it was a little bit too light, so I'm going back in with a darker shade and just adding a bit more contrast just where the kind of bottom of her dress meets the top of her dress, and then I go back through the other colours. For her wand, I'm just using some yellows, and then for her wings I wanted to add in some purples, and these colours are quite muted, these purples. They're kind of like grey purples, and again I went in and then I kind of go back through the different layers again. As you can see, I have sped this up quite a bit, but it is very simple colouring. Really just using a few different shades of markers. I go through darkest to lightest and then I go back through again just to make sure that the darkest areas are still quite dark. And then for her hair, as you can see here, I'm going in with quite a warm brown. And then finishing off just with some purple with a little flower in her hair. I'm then taking the coordinating dynamics here, and the feet and the wand are kind of enclosed, and so I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to be able to line it up properly. I made a mark on that bit of cardstock there on the left hand side, so what I did was I made myself kind of like a mask. So I've cut that out, and then I can place that on top of the image that I'm going to cut out. I can try and line that up as best as possible, and I can kind of see through it quite easily where it's going to cut, and then I can pop that die back in and it kind of fits in like a puzzle piece, and then I can just adhere that down with some low tack tape, run that through my die cutting machine, and then that's going to cut her out. And it's going to make sure that for the most part I did get a little bit close on the wings, and so it wasn't perfectly kind of mapped out, but I think it probably was better than if I just guessed where those pieces were going to go. I'm then taking some on point precision glue, and since I cut that piece out when I was making the mask to cut the other one out, I may as well just use that piece, save wasting it. So I'm going to adhere them one on top of each other, and that's just going to give it a little bit extra stability as well, because that part of the wand there and her feet are quite small, so it just gave it a little bit of extra support. I've stamped out the sentiment onto some black licorice cardstock with Versamark ink, applying some white embossing powder. I'm going to heat set that until it's completely melted. I'm then going to cut that down into a strip. So that sentiment is from the Fairy Special set as well. And now I can work on my background night sky. So I've got a panel of white cardstock here cut to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. And I'm using some Distress Oxide inks and some ink blending tools. I'm starting with my darkest colour here at the top, which is Chipped Sapphire. And I'm kind of just blending that down. I'm then going in with Shaded Lilac, and then going in with Kitsch Flamingo at the bottom. I want to try and kind of blend the bottom colour out to white, so I don't want it to be too harsh. This did take me quite some time. Again, I've sped this up really quite quickly purely because it really did take me quite some time, I have to admit. But I really like the blend in the end with the kind of blue and then the lilac and then the pink there at the bottom. I do think it turned out quite pretty, but it did take me some time kind of going back and forth with the different colours just to get that blend that I want. So it's kind of like a night sky, but with a bit of kind of extra zhuzh with the pink and the purple in it as well. I did get a mark there of the Kitsch Flamingo at the bottom, and so I'm just using a sand eraser and just taking my time. Again, it took quite a while to kind of get that extra ink off, but I kind of pretty much got there in the end. You probably wouldn't notice it if you didn't know it was there. I'm then going to add some splatter onto this background. So I've just got some water here and I'm just picking that up with a brush, and then I'm just going to splatter that onto the background. And because these inks are reactive, it's just going to react with the water and leave some light areas. And I thought it kind of looked a bit like sort of stars or kind of fairy dust type thing. And then I've taken some sheer shimmer spritz in Sparkle. So this is a really pretty shimmery kind of spray, and I'm just splattering that on as well. And once that dries, it's going to give a really pretty iridescence. It doesn't really add much colour. It depends in which kind of light you look at it, but it doesn't really give a huge amount of colour, but it does give some really nice sparkle, and I thought that that would work well with the fairy theme. So you can kind of see the sparkle there, and now it's dry you can see that sparkle even more. I think it's very pretty. I've then got my image here and the sentiment, and I'm just figuring out where I want them to go. I do think this looks quite nice as is, but because that fairy image is so tiny, I felt like she got a little bit lost in the sky. So I ended up cutting my panel down to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I've added some thin foam tape onto the back of that panel, and I'm adhering it down onto an A2 size white card base. So that's a finished size of 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. So I can just place that down, and then I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper just to press that down in case I got any fingerprints in it or anything like that. I've then added some more thin foam tape onto the back of the fairy here, and also the sentiment, just removing those backings, and then I can use some tweezers there just to help me out and pop her down. And I don't think, although she is still very tiny, I don't think she gets lost as much in that expanse of sky. I'm just bringing in my T-square ruler here just to make sure that I stick my sentiment down on straight. And then I can really press those down, make sure that they're not going to move. I then wanted to add a little bit of sparkle onto her wings, and I could have done that with glitter, but I grabbed a Copic Speaker glitter pen and I'm just adding some kind of dots of a lilac colour. I actually don't think there's much sparkle left in those pens anymore. I don't know actually if anyone still uses them, but I quite like just those kind of like little dot detail. And then I went in with a white gel pen as well, and it kind of appears to look kind of like glitter. I'm then taking a clear pen and adding that onto the star of the wand, and then I'm going to finish off with some lilac sequins. I'm just adding 3 around the sentiment and then 1 behind the fairy wings. I ordinarily would always add embellishments in odd numbers, but actually I think it worked out quite nicely with the 4. And then to finish off, I'm just adding some white gel pen highlights onto the fairy. So I'm adding a few onto her dress, and then I do add a couple into her hair. The first one that I add, I don't end up liking it, and I'm going to show you how I rectify that in a second. So I'm just going in, this is the 08 jelly roll pen. For the ones that I used on the wings, I used the 05 because it's a little bit smaller. So the one there on the right hand side, I think actually I don't really like it. So I'm going to take a craft knife and I'm just going to carefully try and scrape that away. And I kind of use my finger to kind of try and get as much of it off as possible, and then kind of scrape it a little bit more. And then I apologise for my head completely getting in the way, but I'm going to use the lightest shade of my Copic marker, the E23, and just go over that. And to be honest with you, you can't really see that that white gel pen was there in the end. So I did manage to kind of rectify it just about. So that's the card finished for today. Really quite clean and simple, but I do like that kind of sparkly glitter fairy feel for that night sky in the background. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.